Imagine this. You're heading into 2026 with the same plan you had in 2023. List on Airbnb, optimize pricing, hope demand holds. But the industry has moved on. Algorithms are stronger. AI is everywhere. Generic listings are invisible. Today, on the check-in, we're breaking down what it actually takes to stay relevant in 2026. No more hacks, not more tools, but a clearer strategy. We're joined by Hailie Maarie to walk through the 2026 host checklist, the 5 moves that separate brands from commodities, and hosts who survive from hosts who scale.
We are very excited today to have the wonderful Hailie with us. Hailie, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here. For our audience who might not know who you are, but they surely will, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Well, my name is Hailie. I am 22 years old, and I started Airbnb back in September of 2022. And I currently have 70 properties across 3 different states. So fully remote, fully, automated with tech and teams. And I've just built my own little empire. So I'm super excited to share some things that I've learned. Also, you guys are both such big inspirations to me. So I'm super excited to be here.
You're too kind, Hailie. That's very, very nice thing to say. More Sarah than me, I'm sure. So in 4 years, that I tracked that to you starting in the business at 18, which is just wonderful. So you've basically grown up in the short-term rental industry. First role, I'd imagine, first significant role. And in 4 years, you've got to 70 listings. So you know a thing or two about this industry. Amazing. Sarah, tell us a bit more about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, sure. So in addition to being an absolute empire on her own, Hailie also is really into the coaching space. And so not only has she built a really successful business in terms of the property management side and the properties that she has in the portfolio, but she's also teaching other people how to do it. And so today we are excited to have Hailie share with us her checklist of how to stay relevant in property management and get ahead in 2026. So without further ado, Hailie, you want to kick us off with, I guess, first and foremost, I'd love to hear from your perspective kind of what's changed in the short-term rental industry since you first got involved 4 years ago, and kind of where we are now. And then that will hopefully lead us into the checklist of how to stay relevant in 2026.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how much has changed. Like, I feel like when I came in, Airbnb short-term rentals were obviously very popular still, but I feel like the way that operators were operating is like the biggest difference. I would say the way operators were running things is different now, and also the way that travelers are booking travel is different. So in return, if you want to be relevant and you still want to have a business, you have to adapt with how the travelers are traveling. So even though I've only been doing it for, 3-4 years, I still noticed so many changes with just you have to be the best of the best. You have to provide the best experience. You have to be the best host, or you're just going to get beat out by your competition. I also think it's gotten a little bit more competitive because of regulations and, permitting. Before, it was a lot of talk of doing these kinds of things, but we didn't really see that many cities implementing it. And now I would say that's kind of been a really big change is you do have to get the permits. You do have to get all these different things to be, operating legally. And a lot of people weren't doing that in the past. And now it's just like you kind of have to do it. So it's separating like the people who are taking it serious and treating it like a legitimate business. And then those who kind of just started it as a side hustle whenever it was cool. And we're seeing those people kind of filter out, and now the top of the top are remaining.
Interesting. Yeah. So, the days of throw it up on an OTA and see how it goes are sort of firmly over.
Yes.
We talk a lot about this idea of if you're in it and you are providing a service and you're working across multiple listings, what are you doing beyond just listing on OTAs to try and build a brand? One that's going to be able to pitch itself to owners as a safe place for them to trust probably their only asset that they own that is making them money, I imagine. And secondly, to find out what it is your guests want out of properties to try and get more of them to come in the first place. So can you talk a little bit more about this idea of like brand building versus just being a sort of a servant to the OTA listing?
Yes. I would say again, building a brand is just so important. I feel like it's a non-negotiable these days. Like a lot of the people who weren't doing it in the past are now trying to play catch up and figure out how to build a brand and be recognized in the space and hold that authority. I would say like the building the brand is two parts. You have one with the owners, like you mentioned, which for me was super, super important because I started when I was 18. So I was already kind of like struggling to get, I feel like, authority in the space a little bit. Like I'm going into these really, high stake conversations with owners at 18 years old. And, being taken serious was a little hard in the beginning. But I think when you have a good brand, you're very confident in like your operations, your systems, whenever you're pitching these owners, like you are selling you, but you're also selling your brand. So if they can buy into that brand and they know, like, and trust you, then they're already sold. So I would say, they go hand in hand. And then also with your travelers, like they buy into a lifestyle, they buy into the experience that you're providing them. And if they can associate that directly with a brand, just like Nike, just like Adidas, like they all have a brand, they all have a feeling that they, you know, evoke in people, and that's why they come back. It's the same exact thing with Airbnb. You want to evoke feelings in people and they buy into that brand and then they will continue to come back and back and back. And that's how you build, a good clientele.
Does that necessarily mean, Haley, that you have to be super careful when you're selecting your portfolio, that everything kind of flows or has a continuity? Because I speak with many property managers, it's like, no, I just want as many properties as possible. And then they start filtering out. And then the ones who have been in the industry for a little bit longer that I speak with, it's like, no, actually, we're cutting the fat. We're really focusing on X type of properties because these are the ones that we found. So that could be luxury. It could be, hey, like lake houses or whatever the case may be. And that's sort of become their niche. And is that as part of the brand identity?
Yeah, that's a really good point. When I started, I just wanted to get properties. So my first three I no longer have them anymore, but that just goes to show as you narrow down your brand, as you narrow down your niche, you will have to like kind of remove some things that no longer align. So when I first started, my goals were just get properties and make money. Now my goal is much bigger than, get properties and make money. It's build a brand. And with that, you have to be more picky with the properties you're bringing on. Like, let's think of, Dollar Tree, for example, or I don't know if you guys know what that is, Dollar General, Dollar Tree. They have a bunch of like just different types of things, right? And it's kind of overwhelming and there's no real clear vision on it. And then you have Lululemon, and any single thing you get from Lululemon is going to be top tier. It's the same thing with your properties. They need to all align. If you have a luxury brand, but you're selling a non-luxury experience, then you're going to get those bad reviews. You're going to get that bad, customer experience, and they're no longer going to book, and it doesn't match your brand. So everything needs to align. And now I'm more focused on the luxury side of things and, not so much the C class or B class buildings like I was in before.
Thanks for making Sarah feel nostalgic for home there with the reference to Dollar General.
Where
You got a
everything
wall.
used to be $1. The Dollar Tree, everything used to be $1. And I remember the first time I went with my allowance, which was $1 a week, by the way, I'm showing my age here. And I went to the Dollar Tree and I was so excited to buy something until I found out that there's sales tax. So everything was $1.05. And then I remember having a full fight with the lady at the cashier's desk about how this is supposed to be the Dollar Tree and it's supposed to be $1, not $1.05. I was
See you next week.
quietly, yeah, I was ushered out by my mom. She's like, "You got to come back when you got $2. Welcome to America."
Well, now it's $125, not including tax. So, it's really getting pricey.
Poor old Sarah. She'll never move back, Hailie, if she hears this. But she'll never going back. Hailie, I imagine then in this time that you've scaled up your portfolio, you're much choosier, right? So you're probably saying no to owners as much as you're saying yes. Let's talk about that power of no, right? So obviously when you were starting out, you probably wouldn't believe that you'd be now in this position where you could be super choosy. Easier with new clients than it is with legacy ones. How does that go? And what advice would you give people there? And how quick would you be to end a relationship with an owner if they didn't quite have the listing that you needed?
Yeah, it's definitely like, I would say a little bit of imposter syndrome, especially in the beginning when it started happening. Like, I used to have a scarcity mindset, I think, around getting yeses because it was so new to me. So once I started getting too many and I was like, well, this doesn't really seem like a property that I want to even work with. Like, it doesn't match, my brand that I'm creating. And I started saying no. It was like a mindset change for sure. I had to overcome that scarcity of like, you can say no because there is something better coming that actually aligns with the brand that you're creating. And I think it's really just like a mental battle of overcoming that you can say no and that what you actually want, you don't have to settle for something that isn't aligned. And I would say that really comes again with like building a strong brand and also just being super, super confident in your operations and how you actually run your business. That is essentially what you're selling these owners is, you're selling them on you, but you're selling them on how you're actually going to do things. So if you can convey that to them in messaging and conversations, then like you are kind of like interviewing them while they think they're interviewing you, but actually you have just as much, if not more control than they actually have because you're the decision maker. So I think that's kind of when you view it like that, it puts it into an interesting perspective of like you hold just as much power as they hold in terms of the, negotiation and stuff.
Following on that sort of power dynamic, switching gears a little bit, so not necessarily with the owners of the properties, but when it comes to the OTAs, I know we've heard over the past few years, it ebbs and flows, right? People either love them or they hate them. It's sort of like a necessary evil. But with the rise of AI and with the rise of, especially sort of a lot of these AI booking agents, there is alongside the ability to build a brand and why that's so important. But there is, I guess, like this rise of direct bookings and these and a big push towards that. So, how do you see the industry shifting? And kind of like, what's the ideal mix going into 2026 if you had to choose between direct bookings and the OTAs? Because obviously the OTAs gives you visibility that through direct you're alone, you're not going to get.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like you said, it definitely goes through ebbs and flows. I feel like you'll talk to people and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I love all the OTAs." And the next week they're like, "I hate them. Like I'm getting off every OTA." It's like a toxic relationship. Like you don't want to use them, but you kind of have to use them. So I would say that's kind of where I stand on it. It's like I obviously don't love them. I don't want my whole business to be on them, but I do think you have to realize that the power they hold and how you can utilize it to build something bigger, which is exactly what I'm doing. So OTAs are amazing. You know how many eyeballs you get in front of just by simply listing onto a free platform? Like there is no amount of ad spend that I could put on a booking that would get as many eyeballs as these platforms have. So I think capitalizing on it, using it as leverage, and then taking that traffic and redirecting it to a direct booking website, which is essentially what we all want. We want to own as much as our business as possible, but you have to realize the opportunity that these OTAs give you. But I think where people kind of lose it is they don't take that traffic and convert it. They kind of just leave it as is and leave it into the guest's hands to take that extra step to then book direct. That's where a lot of people are messing up. They don't have a good enough brand. They don't have the systems in place. They don't have the marketing in place to take that traffic from the OTAs and redirect it. I think that's like the gap right now that I'm seeing.
How do you do that without giving away the secret sauce? But how do you do that? It seems the OTAs have all kinds of controls in place, right? So then obviously you have to be mindful of it if you're going to be listed there. But what are your tricks and tips for the audience who's looking to increase their direct bookings?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to the guest experience and kind of that brand you're building. So I think the guest experience starts even before somebody books your property. So that experience is starting as soon as they see your listing. So do you have a brand in your listing? What is the name on your profile? Can that name be searched? I know there's like a big divide between like being an individual host on your portfolio and then being a brand on your portfolio. And I've split tested. I think both are equally good. But if you really want to build a searchable brand, then you need to be able to be searched. If people don't know what they're looking for, then they can't go on Google and search up for your direct booking website. So everything tracks back to that first impression of seeing your listing. So having, if you have a vibe for your listings, all of your photos should be kind of relatively the same vibe as well, because again, this is your brand. Your name needs to be searched. And then once the guests actually check into the property, that's the second part of the guest experience. So you have when they see your listing, they have when you book your listing, and then when they show up to the property. So inside of all of my properties, I have basically branded everything in a very seamless way to where it kind of subliminally, like, you're recognizing the brand without it being too much into your face. So like my towels are branded. I have my guidebook, which is branded. I have a magnet on my fridge with a QR code that takes you to my direct booking website, which is branded. So everything subliminally is kind of pointing you back to Book Direct without it being too in your face and like annoying.
I had a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, Hailie, who was doing something similar with the QR code on the fridge,
Hmm.
which I think is really smart because as you pour that first glass of cold white wine and you get that hit, which is Sarah's favorite part of the whole holiday, you obviously close the fridge door and you see the incentive to come and do it again. It's a wonderful idea.
You're like, sold.
Yeah, I'm an easy target.
But that shows you, doesn't it, the power of building something that's recognizable. So they think, oh, that was amazing. And too often when I'm looking at accommodation, very recently I was looking for hotels for a trip and a business trip. And you go onto the hotel's direct booking website and it was abysmal. And I was suddenly thinking about the security of my credit card. So can we talk specifically about how you think people are approaching the actual website itself, because that's so important. We haven't got time to open the can of worms as well to talk about how it needs to be ready for like AI agentic search and all of that stuff. But I feel like that's still a real quality miss for lots of people.
Yeah, I think and it can be very intimidating too. I've noticed, like, I've talked to people who are like, they want to do direct bookings, but they feel like it's so much liability, which it is, but with the more liability, you're taking more ownership. So I think it's kind of like, do you want to take the easy way out and just own less and be less stressed maybe? Or do you want to own more, have a little bit more liability, but create those systems to truly like buy back your time and give you more freedom? So I think every host is completely different, but there's so many entryways into building a direct booking website. A lot of the PMSs nowadays have direct booking websites on their platforms, so it makes it super easy. They already have it built out. You can kind of just copy and paste your brand, and then later down the line, actually build your true own direct booking website, your own domain where you own everything. But that is like an entry into direct bookings is, relying on these PMSs, utilize what they have. And then once you learn how to operate, you learn what direct booking is like, you can always build it out and, start owning more and more of your processes. You don't have to go from like 0 to 100, your first day. There's baby steps you can take to kind of get more comfortable with the process.
Let's talk a little bit more about kind of once you get those guests in. I'm still on the QR code, mostly because I'm thinking about the wine that was in the fridge. But I'm curious about how you see this concept of the guest experience, because so many things now have become either so commonplace that everybody does them and so nobody appreciates them, or I think on the flip side, the longer that I'm at, visiting different short-term rentals, I feel like hosts have just dropped the ball. I don't know if they don't see the ROI or they don't see the needle tipping, and so it's almost gone in the opposite direction. So let's talk a little bit more about the overall guest experience and what some of the things are that you do with your properties to really make that part of the brand and tie that together, and what you would recommend our audience do as well on the flip side of that. And that could be for any different types of portfolios, right? Not everybody listening is going to have luxury properties where it makes sense to put a super nice bottle of wine or local chocolates or whatever. What are some things that people can do kind of on every budget and with every type of brand to tip the needle? But first, what do you do?
Yeah.
Let's learn from the master.
I think it really all ties back to like human interaction and just like being a human in a world where like AI I feel like is taking over everything and everyone's like AI this, AI that. Like, let's just go back to how we are programmed as human beings, which is to have social interaction with people. That's why Airbnb even started, was to connect people and build experiences together. And I feel like a lot of us are kind of losing touch on that. And that's why we're struggling. Like, all of us are trying to adopt AI 100% into our businesses, but we're losing the plot, I feel like. So there's a lot of very little things that I do. So for example, whenever someone is checking in, I have a dedicated VA who calls you upon your check-in and is like, hey, just making sure you got in okay. We saw that, you checked in. Is there anything we can help you with? Anything off the bat you noticed, do you need more towels? Like, how's your experience? How can we help you? This is us directly. You can call us if you need anything. And I think like breaking that barrier, like that alone is way more powerful than an automated message. You know how many automated messages people send out we all know it's automated. Like, we know we're not actually talking to anyone, but the second you break that, like, conversation and that barrier is down, they're like, "Oh my gosh, my host just called me. They didn't want anything from me. They just wanted to know how my check-in was." And that alone, like, sets the tone for the rest of the trip. They know they can reach out to you. They know there's a real person there. And then after their stay, we also do the same thing. So after you check out, whether it was a good experience, maybe something happened, but pulling like something from their stay into the conversation. Like if you know they're coming because it's their mother's birthday, whenever we call, "Hey, yeah, just wanted to, say mom, happy birthday. We hope you enjoy your time. If you need anything, we're here." Same thing upon the checkout. We hope you had a great stay. If there's anything we could do to help make sure it's a 5-star stay, let us know. We would appreciate your feedback. And then that kind of trickles into everything else as like getting those reviews, getting good reviews, and then kind of like alleviating those negative reviews if you might have one.
Uh, I think that's really smart, Hailie. And when you say it, it seems self-evident that every host should be wanting to have those touch points. But I assume a lot don't. So this is really fantastic advice. The challenge would be, how do you do that at scale? But you've got 70 listings and you're still doing it. Like, is it something that you find pulls out problems and feedback, and like, are the trends in it that help you across the business, or is it something you just feel is a minimum requirement when it comes to providing service?
I think it's the bare minimum nowadays. And if you asked me 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't say that because I wasn't even really doing it. This is something, within the last year that I started doing, but we know the OTAs are cracking down on, how strict they are with hosts, and they're forcing us, although we might not like it, they are doing us a favor by forcing us to be better operators. So it's like a love-hate relationship. It's like, okay, we can't just get reviews taken down like we could before, where if someone gives a 4-star, you're like reaching out to support and they'll take it down. Now it's like they're kind of respecting both parties the same now. So I feel like couple years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that. Now, 100%. And I think a lot of it comes down to the systems that hosts have or lack of, therefore. I talk to so many operators who have way more properties than me, but they have no time to do anything because they're so tied to the business. So whenever I say, "Oh yeah, we call all of our guests," immediately you go to, how do you call every single guest if you have like, 25 check-ins a day? Who's doing that? But it's like, build a team, build systems that can be replicated, and then it's not more work if you have the teams and the systems in place. It's just better experience.
I love that. Speaking of the overall experience, not just of the guest, but one of the things that we hear a lot is briefly touched on regulation, but I think one of the things that we always talk about in the industry is advocacy and how we can actually become part of the local community and make sure that the properties that we have are giving back to the local community rather than being a burden on the local community, right? That's essentially how we're going to keep our industry alive, especially in the face of, pending regulations and a lot of times without any evidence behind them. So what are you doing with your properties to kind of lead that local narrative, and how important is being part of that local community to you?
I think it's so important. Again, I think everything comes back to community, to people, to interaction. Whenever you're, at least for me personally, whenever I'm going into a market, it's a business. It's a transaction between two parties. You, the owners, and the city essentially. So showing up, being involved is so important. And I think that's why I've had relatively, easy success in that way, because I show up, because I am involved, because I want them to know that, like, this is a business transaction, yes, but I am here to help you. You are here to help me. So, kind of finding that common ground of how we can both support each other and support the community, I think is super important. And a lot of people don't necessarily dislike short-term rentals. They dislike the kind of idea they have in their head about it. So if you can kind of reframe that idea and actually let them know that you're showing up to help the community, you're showing up to help the city, and you are here, you are present, you have a team who is here and present to show up and help, then that barrier kind of gets broken and they kind of changes the perspective that they have.
Yeah, Hailie, I think that's right. I think that it's super important that they come and that you come and that policymakers see who it is that's representing the short-term rental industry locally. But it's very, very easy to say no to the idea of a global platform like Airbnb, Vrbo, Expedia. Now, that's the really simple conversation. If they see a local business person who's trying to grow and do the right thing and advocate for that town, bring tourists into that town, it becomes much harder, right? Because every town wants more tourists. And I imagine it's no different for where you live.
Yeah. And I think too, it's important to like, it all comes back to the little details. I feel like a broken record by saying that, but it really does. Like learning about the city, learning about, the history behind the city, where you can go into these conversations and show that you actually know about the market, you actually care about the market, and you're trying to highlight those things to bring that tourism. I think is like, I've had conversations with people and like, how do you know that? I did a little chat GBT search before I came to this meeting and I learned about the city that I want to invest in because I equally need to know about it too if I'm going to invest into it. So those little things leave a mark and they truly leave an impression on these conversations that you have.
Hailie, before we wrap up and we'll review our full checklist, but we've talked a lot about AI versus sort of the human touch. And so, where do you see the role of AI in rental management moving forward? Where can it help? So, I know you mentioned, for example, with the calls that you have a virtual assistant that helps with that. So, tell us a little bit more about that and other examples where AI can be helpful, but not necessarily replacing the human thing. So, what are the things that have to be done by a human, and what are the things that AI can give us a nudge on?
Yeah. I think if you're not using AI, you will truly like just get outperformed by your competition because it's very, very fast moving. I feel like every day I wake up and there's like a new advancement in AI. And if you're not using it personally, but also in your business, it's inevitable that you're going to get beat out. I do agree that we're not in the time where AI is replacing humans, but I think it's freeing up our time and allowing us to train them, to track them better than we could have ever before. So I don't necessarily think humans should be scared that we're going to get replaced, but we can utilize it to improve our systems. So I use a lot of AI for my guest messaging. That is very, very simple. Like, it's trained nowadays where you can go in and if a guest says something, hey, what's the Wi-Fi? You can train the AI to where it knows all the Wi-Fi codes for every single listing and it can automatically send out a message. For a while, I'm very big on like time audits. I do it on myself. I do it on my team constantly. I have them do it themselves. And they would come back and I'm like, where are you spending the majority of your time? And they're like, guest communications. And it was just like, why are we spending so much time responding to what the Wi-Fi code is? Even if it's everywhere, people are still going to ask you. But it was taking up so much of their time, almost like 60-70% of their working day, which is a lot of time that you could be allocating to higher ROI things. So we eliminated that with AI. We use Bestie AI. They send out all the messages now between automated messages and then the AI replies. And now my team actually has so much more free time to go do other things. So I would say there's ways we can implement it into the actual systems operations. So guest communications, also like SEO, optimizing your listings, changing your photos, changing the titles, all this stuff I use AI for. But on the latter, I think I use it the most in training my actual team. So I have 12 employees currently. We're on the phones doing cold calling, outbound outreach. We're also customer service. We're calling our guests now. So I use AI to actually train my real humans. So it's called Kendo AI, but essentially it's like a training software and tracking software to where anytime I bring on a new hire, instead of me training them, I can just create a prospect that I want them to learn from, and then AI can literally train them for me. So it frees up my time, and then also I can track what my team is actually doing. So my cold callers, how are you handling these objections? What objection do you get to where you freeze and you don't know how to handle it? With these AI tools, it can kind of highlight them and then free up my time where I can just overview it and be like, okay, we need to work on this, or you're killing this. So it's been amazing seeing how you can integrate it into both, but I think you need to be implementing onto both sides, not just one or the other.
Yeah, I think that's right. Speaking of AI,
Yes.
I actually was taking notes as we were chatting as well a little bit, and AI has helped me define sort of the checklist, right? Because I know we had spoken about it previously, but I think it would be great to kind of have some initial structure as well of like sort of what that hit list is. So let me know if I got anything wrong, and
Okay.
then we'll see the power of AI. Oh, 2026, you want to stay top of the game. First thing I heard is building your personal brand and the brand of your company, and creating a seamless experience is going to be paramount. Direct bookings, right? So number 2, direct bookings. We need to figure out the way to do that. I loved what you were saying about sort of having that be subliminal, either in the photos or in your use of the other OTAs, where it's completely not in violation, but it's just subtly telling people, hey, this is a brand. There's something here that you can actually go and find, and then making sure that your brand is actually searchable. So that's a point in favor, of course, of having the brand name rather than just managed by Hailie, for example. AI, which we've touched on so much. So using it in the areas where it can absolutely be a support, and then using humans where it really makes a difference. I love the ROI analysis that you did with your team. I need to know which tools you used. I'm sure it was an AI to do that. So you'll have to ping me with that later, because I'm always looking to optimize time. And I always find myself doing things thinking, why am I doing this? This could be done by somebody else, or this could be done by AI. This is a waste of time. So I need to get on top of that. And then we talked quite a bit as well about the guest experience. So making sure that that guest experience is really top of quality, whether that is continuity as well as kind of ties into the brand, or whether that's just something simple like you mentioned, calling as soon as they arrive, right? That really makes the difference of letting them know somebody's here, and that can be the difference between a 4.5-star rating and a 5-star rating, 100%. And
100%.
then finally, number 5 is local advocacy. So just the importance of being a part of the local community, not just being another property manager, but being Hailie in this market that has a face and a name that people know. So those are my top 5. Those are kind of my takeaways. Anything else that we thank you. Anything else
I think
important?
did just spark something whenever I mentioned you came back to the advocacy part. So I just want to add that really quick. I also like send gifts to my owners all the time. Like I am the gift that just keeps on giving. Like I will pay my rent on time constantly, but I also will send you Starbucks. I will send you Amazon gift cards during the holidays. And I like make routine check-ins where I don't have to like go see the owners or see the properties, but simply by like showing up, even if it's, once every other quarter, 2 times a year, or you send someone that they know on your team to the property to check in, that goes so far. Like they love it. They respect it. It's very open communication, and it just like feels real, which separates the people who never show up. You never hear from them. It feels very kind of like transactional in a way, which yes it is, obviously, but I just wanted to add that because I forgot to mention it earlier. But all of your points I think were amazing, and I truly like think that if you do these little things, like just by doing these little things, they're so huge. You will just continue to grow and become a better and better host.
I love that. And that's a great example of something you wouldn't have the time, or your team wouldn't have the time to do if you were spending 60% of your time answering what's the Wi-Fi password. So this is a
Exactly.
great example, I think, of like how to use humans where we need it, and AI to cover and free up the time so that we can do the more human things that really matter.
Yes.
Guys, I think we hit it. Hailie, thank you so much for joining us. We're honored to have you on the check-in this week. Come back and see us again soon, please.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for having me. I love you guys. You're the best. And hopefully everyone listening in learned something. And if you guys ever need anything or I can be of help, I'm more than happy to do so.
Great. So reach out to Hailie on social media, so Instagram, LinkedIn, all those places. If you've enjoyed today's show, please hit like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places. Until next week, take care. Thank you.